Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next frontier in insights. I am Yogesh Chavda, founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also a faculty member at the University of South Carolina and the director for the Center for Marketing Solutions, which is a new title that I just acquired last week. So I'm really excited about that. But today is not about me, it's actually about Thor. So if you guys don't know who Thor is the CEO of a company called Stravito from Sweden. That's the only thing I'm going to say because he's going to talk about the rest of it. So, Thor, first and foremost, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Yogesh, and that was very kind introduction that you made.
Oh, it's going to get even kinder, my friend. It's going to get even kinder. So, why don't we first start off by you explaining to our audience who is Stravito and how did you, come up with the idea for Stravito? Let's start with that first.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and again, super excited to be on here today. So,
Yeah.
what is Stravito, and how did we come about founding Stravito? And I think that in essence, Stravito is a purpose-built solution for market research and insights, and it's an enterprise platform that allows employees at the world's largest global organizations to store, discover, and integrate consumer insights with ease into their day-to-day work. So, in essence, it's knowledge management for insights. It's a
Hmm.
platform that combines AI with a very user friendly experience to bring insights to the fingertips of teams around the world.
Hmm.
No convoluted manuals, no training required.
Amazing.
And so, how did we get there? Which was the other question you asked. Well, I mean, we are a team of four founders that have both, I would say, entrepreneurial background and market research background. So Stravito was founded in Sweden in 2017 by people with experiences at companies like GfK, Ipsos, and then what is now iZettle PayPal.
Mhm.
Really a diverse group of people who had seen and felt and experienced the pains that we're currently trying to solve.
Amazing, amazing. So, that's not the only thing you do, by the way, right? You do something else called a podcast of your own. So,
Oh,
let's
yes,
talk
yes.
about that for a second too. So, tell us
Well,
about
thank
your
you for
podcast.
yeah, no, I think for me as a leader within the building this company, which is Stravito, and being a leader within the insight space, I think for us it's really essential to stay very close to the industry, to really stay close to the people that lead change and that drive innovation. So
Yeah.
we have the Consumer Insights podcast. It's a podcast that has bi-weekly episodes where we interview leaders from companies all over the world, different industries, and they get to share their experiences and their challenges.
Mhm.
And on a personal level, it serves me to learn and explore and discover and effectively, as Wayne Gretzky put it, identify, skate to where the puck is going. So where is it going?
Yeah.
And but it's also an amazing world to contribute and to give back to this amazing industry, which is the market research and insights industry.
Yeah. And in full transparency, I was one of your guests a couple of years ago. That's actually how you and I met. If it's just for the audience so that they know.
That's correct, and very happy to have stayed in touch with you, Yogesh. You're a very inspiring person.
Oh, thank you, my friend. So are you. So, let's talk about why we're actually here, right? So, you talked about knowledge management, and you have been impacted dramatically by the entire AI revolution that started back in, that became public in December of 2022 with OpenAI introducing ChatGPT. So, let's start with the first question around how are you viewing the role of AI in the market research space? Let's start with that general question, and we can then drill into that.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. And before I answer that question, I would actually just talk about AI and
Mhm.
before we go into AI in the market research space.
Yeah.
So I think that if we just kind of take a macro perspective here and we just take a look at technology and the evolution of technology in general, in the past 50 years, we've seen a couple of platform shifts in the tech industry. So and generally speaking, it takes like every 10 to 15 years, there's a bigger shift. So we've, as an example, transitions from mainframes to PCs, then to the web, followed by
Mhm.
smartphones. And now, of course, smartphones are maturing, and we expect the next big shift.
Mhm.
So, and I think that for market research, I definitely believe that AI can be one of those big shifts. I think it's something that can completely change what we do, how we do it, what we are able to do. So
Mhm.
in that sense, I see a lot of opportunity. Of course, there is a lot of concern. There are a lot of people that are afraid,
Mhm.
and many believe that AI will, eradicate jobs or significantly diminish creative work.
Mhm.
I actually don't believe that. I think that what will happen is something that will probably be in a couple of stages. So I think, first of all, and this is kind of what we are seeing, we'll see AI be integrated into the tools we use.
Mhm.
But all of these tools will have a human in the loop, that will have a human in the process. But eventually, those tools will evolve and then will replace the old ones. So I
Mhm.
think that the exciting part is that really what happens is, and we, I mean, there are a couple of historical comparisons that can be made.
Mhm.
Is really what happens is, in the beginning we infuse AI into what we do,
Mhm.
and many of our tools will become better, and
Mhm.
then eventually AI is going to change what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the interesting component. So I really see it as kind of a multi-step process.
Yes.
But I think there are so many examples, of kind of when technology comes along. And as a very stupid example, one could think that Excel, which has kind of completely, revolutionized productivity for accountants, we
Mhm.
actually have more accountants now than before. It's not less. So it's again, I think many times these empowering tools
Mhm.
actually don't have the effect people anticipate.
Yeah, but I think in that I think there's an implicit point you're also making. So I'll just make it overt, and that is that you have to acquire new skill sets to adapt to these AI tools, and you can't avoid it. And I think that the fear of embracing some of these new skill sets, you need to put those fears aside, because if you embrace it and you start learning how to use these tools in different ways, right, you'll find your path in terms of creating productivity improvements or value added improvements and so on and so forth. At least that's kind of like how I'm viewing it. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
100%. I definitely think that's the case. And I think we just need to embrace the reality that this is here to stay and it
Mhm.
will bring a ton of change. And I think that in beginning us is going to empower us to do what we've done historically in a much more
Mhm.
faster way. And then eventually it will change what we do.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be transformative for the better. It's going to be an empowering tool.
My brother told me something on Sunday, and I think it's kind of fitting in this part of the conversation. He reminded me of a quote that came from the former Saudi oil minister from I don't know how many years ago, but he said, "The Stone Age didn't end because there was a lack of stones. It ended because of innovation that led us to the Bronze Age."
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
so I think we're kind of like in a similar situation here in a way, or would you not agree with that? I don't know. So.
No, I 100% agree, and I think that there are a lot of I think there are a lot of just no, I 100% agree with that. And I was going to make analogies to other technical shifts, but I we can save that for later.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So let's bring it back to market research, right? Because and marketing in general, right? So that's the space you play in. Your company's focused on, obviously, that space as well. Um, and you're talking to a lot of people as well, right? So, um, if I was to ask, what's the word on the street in terms of what are like the top two or three trends that you're seeing in terms of how companies are looking at this space, how people are looking at this space? What are you seeing?
No, so I think that there are a lot of different trends, and I think that anyone going to a market research conference will see that every booth now has almost like a Gen AI logo attached to their original product. And so
Mhm.
I think what we're seeing is effectively Gen AI being infused in most things. It's really
Mhm.
trying to find its way everywhere.
Yeah.
What I do believe is I think that if I mean, in the space we are, of course, what we see, it's empowering people in terms of retrieving and assessing information in a way that we had
Mhm.
never anticipated, and I think that's extremely exciting. And
Mhm.
I can share more about what we do eventually later on.
Yeah.
But I think that in the space of data and kind of productivity around data, I think we're going to see a ton. I
Mhm.
also think that Interesting. So I'm just going to make a general reflection on technology, and we kind of think about, and then I'll tie it to market research.
Hmm.
So when we reflect on, say, successful platforms in the past,
Hmm.
I think that we find that in many cases, aspects that were initially seen as flaws or bugs, they actually
Hmm.
become the defining features
Hmm.
or in engineering constraints that actually transform a
Hmm.
quirky concept into a robust platform.
Hmm.
So tying that to like when in the beginning, I mean, there were a lot of detractors that spoke about hallucinations and and just like the limitations of,
Hmm.
say, as it were, ChatGPT.
Hmm.
But really, what is important to remember in that specific example is that you've asked a probabilistic model to give you an analytical answer, which is like a yes, no, a correct answer. But really, it's a probabilistic model which tells you this is probably something that is relevant to your question. So,
Hmm.
whereas if you start thinking about it differently and saying, well, what if we applied the strengths of this technology to do what those strengths are good at, which is
Hmm.
effectively optionality, which is that what you get from that probabilistic model, then suddenly, we might see this technology flourish even more. So what does that mean for market research?
Yeah.
For market research, it means, for instance, that it can give us a ton of optionality when we, for instance, consider innovation research, when we consider looking into, and scenario analysis. So I think that
Mhm.
from that perspective, I think that we then suddenly we're asking the technology to do stuff that plays to its strengths, which in my opinion, is probably where it will flourish initially.
So let me play it out a little bit further. So let's say if you are working on figuring out an innovation roadmap, and you need to not only know what their trends are today, but what is that product category or service category going to look like 5 or 10 years out, and you need to create scenarios. I think what you're saying is that a tool like ChatGPT or any generative AI tool can help you uh, develop those kinds of scenarios based on any criteria that you choose to incorporate into the scenario planning process, right? Is that what you're really talking about?
Yes, and again, to make it even clearer, I think like if we take the example of a traditional database, what you can do if you
Hmm.
go to traditional database is like, okay, tell me what's in in column A, row column A, row 10.
Yeah, yeah,
And then it gives you an answer, and that's
right,
effectively, there's a right and wrong answer, and
correct.
that's kind of what a traditional analytical model will help you do, like a tool
Yep.
set.
Hmm.
Whereas if you think about the probabilistic nature of generative AI and large language models, what they tell you is like, well, I will give you what's probably a good, probably irrelevant, because it's vector spaces. So it's probably going to tell, assuming all these vector spaces are true,
Yep.
then this is probably what's relevant. And suddenly what that means is that you can get something you couldn't get from the analytical models, which is optionality. And
Hmm.
optionality suddenly tells you, well, that means that because of that, you can actually ask it to give you variant scenarios. And those scenarios can be applied to anything. It can be scenarios for the best copy you should write, or scenarios. It
Oh
can be
yeah.
at that granularity level, or it can also be, again, kind of tying it to what we do at Stravito, of course, is the massive data sets that you might already have within your organization, and
Mhm.
put that data to work in a completely, until now, unimaginable way.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think that that's the shift in mindset and the shift in your skill set that you have to think about, where you're going from, like you said, from a right wrong answer to a probabilistic optionality approach. That's a pretty significant shift for a lot of market researchers at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I think it's going to empower us to get rid of a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the work that
Mhm.
we maybe didn't enjoy the most out of all
Yeah.
the things we had to do,
Yeah.
and free up a lot of time for us to do what a lot of people have on their, this is really, I really would like to spend 20% of my time working on
Mhm.
foresights and building. but just as it is, I'm struggling to keep up with the demands that come in from everywhere.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that this is probably something that can help us do those things, right? So
Mhm.
I think,
Mhm.
and I'll just give you a very stupid example. So there was a study that came out that basically looked at Upwork. So Upwork is a freelancing job site,
Yep.
and they basically asked, the study was asking itself like, okay, so how does the the existence of generative AI impact, what are the most impacted jobs? What is it that people are demanding more of, and what are they demanding less of?
Yeah.
And as an example, and as we all know, one of the powers and amazing features of generative AI, I mean, we talk about text, is also image generation and video generation.
Yes.
And guess
Yes.
what? That's actually the graphic design, web
Mhm.
development, video editing were
Mhm.
some of the jobs that grew following generative AI. So it's that's counterintuitive, right? Because
It is.
suddenly,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yet that's exactly what happened. It kind of goes back to, so I think that, I think it's, one should not necessarily take the mindset of, because it's good at it, it's going to replace. It might instead empower us to do more. That's
Yes.
interesting.
I personally have an experience of that literally in the last 48 hours, right? Where I was building this presentation out. I was, having these persona definitions and so on and so forth. And there are tools out there where you can take, you can translate text to video, right? And you can use stock imagery and all that kind of wonderful stuff. And I used that, right? It was very effective when I was presenting it yesterday because people could see what I was talking about. I could have my presentation would have been very dry, going
Mm,
through slide after slide about persona X, mindset, habits, this, that, and the other. But by making it visual, making it interactive, and by the way, I'm no video editor, I'm not a copywriter, I'm none of those things. But using generative AI, I was able to do all those things and get it ready, for yesterday's presentation, right? So I just shared that as an example, also because it wasn't in my skill set to do video stuff before, but am I a person now who can do that? Maybe, right?
yeah. Yeah, and maybe now that you've gotten started, you'll seek even more help, because like now you've
Yeah,
gotten the basic elements in place, and you need even more support to take it to the next level.
yeah, exactly, right. So that's what I think is the empowering part and the excitement part. I think that you're referring to, right? In terms of you can do more, you just have to give yourself permission and license to do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So amazing. So as you've been with your company, you've been obviously been building out AI tools on your platform and things like that. Have you already started getting any use cases that you can share or even talk about it at a general level?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, but like on a general level, I mean, if I talk about Stravito,
Yeah.
generally, we have a number of the world's leading brands that use Stravito.
Hmm.
And they use Stravito to, of course, store, to share, to integrate insights, again,
Yeah.
so they can make more informed business decisions.
Hmm.
As an example, we started working with Pernod Ricard,
Hmm.
which was, then they were, looking for a tool with vision that would inspire individuals and that would encourage them to engage. And the way they talked about it was the Netflix of insights.
Huh.
And so then you might ask what happened. And I think now, being some years in working with them, we have more than 3,000 users that use the Stravito platform, which is internally branded as the Insights Factory.
Wow.
They have been able, in terms of kind of how they measure success, they've been able to avoid a duplication. They have increased insight engagement. There's a lot of sharing discussions that goes on between people, and what they discover is like, wow, we didn't even know this content existed, right? And that we see that quite a lot.
Mm.
A different example is Reckitt, a
Hmm.
UK
Yeah.
based company, and they, of course, had a similar agenda, but like more strong desire to say democratize data and analytics in a way where they really made sure to capitalize on the efficiencies of the research spend.
Mm.
uh, but doing so in a more, how can we do so in a way that encourages collaboration? So what
Hmm.
we did is we work with them closely. It was we had there were a lot of things to think about, and there was a complex migration that involved more than 200,000 files, which is like a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of data to transfer.
Yeah.
And they are branding it Lexi internally. And again, we have more than 1,500 users. We handle, I think today, more than 400,000 files. And then we just continue to work with them to expand it and to, again, maximize the value of the research at scale.
Amazing. So, these are big numbers, right? So, and with that depth and breadth of data that's sitting around, packaging it and creating, that kind of engagement with so many, with thousands of users at the end of the day is it's very interesting and very inspiring, actually. So, could you speak a little bit about, are you putting any, like, on top of that solutions that you've got, any specific, like, custom tools that relate to AI at all, or not yet?
Well, I think we have AI. I would say AI has been a foundational element of the company and the product even since its first version.
Okay.
And I think obviously, so what is AI? I mean, AI is I mean, currently we talk about generative AI, which is, I would say, a branch of AI. I mean, there's machine learning, there's natural language processing, which is
Yeah.
the part that refers to language, etc. So every single component of our product has AI integrated into it. And what we and again, the way we look at it is ultimately you as our customers are looking to solve problems, and if we can solve them with AI, we will.
Mhm.
So I'd say that it ranges from our standard search to the way we classify information and documents to the way we generate summaries or descriptions to the way
Mhm.
we actually answer questions, which is what we're doing with Distributed Assistant.
Talk to us about the assistant, and I have a follow-up question after that too. But just for everyone to understand, what is the assistant?
Sure. So what's Distributed Assistant?
Yep.
Yeah, no. So what we tried to do is, again, kind of our one of our foundational beliefs is, like, at the end of the day, and this has been true for a lot of people that have worked in corporate environments for very long, is you leave work and you encounter amazing software like Spotify and Netflix that's super easy to use, and
Mhm.
then you go to work and then it feels like you're back in the Stone Ages. So and so what we did is we said, well, what if we combine that brilliant user experience with the latest generative AI tech?
Mhm.
And with that, we basically built and are, have recently announced Distributor Assistant, which is really an easy to use tool
Mhm.
that we see, and the beta trials that we're doing, that customers really enjoy doing.
Mhm.
So the way to think about it, it's a trusted insights companion. It's developed specifically for insights discovery in the context of very large organizations. So as a conversational tool, what you can do with the assistant is you can collaborate with the
Mhm.
technology to find answers faster. You can also use it to ask better questions.
Ah,
And then while you do this, you are constantly in every single question leveraging a wealth of insights that exist within your organization. And that can then, of course, be applied to whatever your problem you're solving.
so
So, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, please go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. So the question I was going to ask is, with OpenAI announcing last week, GPT 4.0,
Yep.
which has a conversational component to it, and it's a multimodal model at the end of the day. Um, are you planning to build stuff like that into your assistant as well? Or, I'm curious. I'm just having to ask now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no, I mean, of course, there are secrets we can't reveal
of course.
yet, but happy to tell you what we're thinking about. The way I look at it is just like, any um, uh, I think that in the beginning, when you set out to find out something, be
Mhm.
it, let's take something that a lot of people can relate to. So you're
Yeah.
going to plan your summer trip or your Christmas trip. You're going somewhere with your family. And
Mhm.
then, so you have an idea. You maybe say, hey, I want to go to Italy and I'm considering going to Lake Como, as an
Yeah.
example. And
Yep.
you go to your Google and you make a query. And what you'll discover is that once you've asked those initial questions, you will discover new information that's going to trigger new questions. And whether you do this in Google or ChatGPT, what happens is as you progress, you discover new information. But typically, what you discover might be disjointed to what you are looking for next. So you might have found, say, a web page that tells you about something amazing at a specific location, which then triggers a new thought that forces you to start all over. Now,
Mm-hmm.
imagine you could, but what I'm trying to highlight here is ultimately what you would like to do is just drill deeper and deeper into that initial query. So questions reveal answers, answers trigger new questions. Now
Mm-hmm.
imagine you could do that with your data. So effectively what we do with the assistant is you start your query, you learn something, and then you realize like, Christ, I need to know more about X, Y, and Z. You can then continue the conversation, keeping all that context in mind, building on all the knowledge your organization has. And those things were just unthinkable a couple of years ago.
Completely. Well, that's
So that's what's really the exciting part.
yeah. So in a way, I'm curious. I'm just thinking out loud now, but we talk a lot about companies, large companies, having institutional knowledge, right? In a way, what you're describing is a different way of capturing institutional knowledge.
100%. And I think
So,
we 100%. And I think that there's ever since we started out, there's the concept of organizational memory loss. And there's like
yeah,
anyone that has commissioned a ton of studies over multiple years knows that there's a fraction of that information that gets reused. You commission a study, you use it for whatever project you've bought it for,
yep.
and then afterwards it just goes there and nobody uses it, and there might still be a ton of valuable information. Well, guess what? This is a way for you to actually continue querying the knowledge that your organization sits on.
No, amazing. Yeah, because I remember even like 10 years ago, that was my single biggest pain point for working for some pretty large organizations where there was information sitting around in people's SharePoints, not easily available. All those things have been solved over the last decade, but now with these kinds of tools and assistance that you're describing, it just takes you to a whole new level in terms of what you can do, in terms of querying, with your questions, getting the answers that lead to new questions, etc. I completely get what you're saying. I think the interesting thing, though, in all of this is that um, you can, the proprietary information that you're referring to gets you down one path. I wonder if a company was to do that just using large language models which is publicly domain information, how similar or different would it actually be? I'm really curious on that question. I don't know if anyone's going to actually answer that question. Have y'all thought about that question out of curiosity?
I think it's a highly relevant question, and I think it opens up a lot of possibilities, and I think that um, one of the things that we know, I mean, serving the enterprise, serving some of the world's largest, biggest companies,
Yeah.
we know that trust and confidentiality is always at the heart of what we do, but
Yep.
also what we need to give our clients. And whether that's Stravito, the core service, Stravito Assistant,
Hmm.
it has, ever since the get-go, we've always had the utmost focus on reliability, privacy, security. So one of
Yeah.
the things we've done is just making sure we're ISO 271 certified, and generally in everything we do, just adhere to the highest standards of trust and confidentiality. Now, in the case of the assistant, we actually provide you with all the references. So if you get an answer, not only do you get an answer, but we also tell you from exactly what piece of information we've sourced
Hmm.
those statements. And you can easily just download a PowerPoint with references to those things. So and I think for us, to answer your question, I think there will come a point where we definitely will do that. But I think at this point, people are just so um, they generative AI is so new that a lot of people want to understand where the answers came from. And I think when you
Yeah.
source enormous quantities of data and you are unable to provide that same transparency, it becomes problematic. So that's
Mm.
the only thing I would highlight. Having said that, I think it's unavoidable. At some point, it will definitely be something that will be paired
Mm.
to offerings.
Yeah.
But
And
did
I
that
think
answer
for large
your
organizations,
question?
uh, partially, but I'm going to probe a little bit further, right? So
Sure.
you answered in the context of making sure there's for proprietary information there's data security
Yeah.
and protocols in place, and you've obviously done all those things, and and rightly so, right? My question is actually a little bit further than that, which is that there's this at least what I'm hearing from people, and I'm questioning the assumption behind
Yep.
it, which is that the assumption is that our proprietary information will give me better answers than the large language model that's out there,
Mm.
from a chat GPT or or from a Gemini or whatever, because I have proprietary information on my business, right?
Yes.
Through market research studies, this, that, and the other, right? And for large companies, they, like you gave the examples of the two companies you gave, they've done a lot of work. That's why you have 400,000 plus files, right? So
Yep.
there's a lot of information sitting there. But my question is, you know, if you look at all that information versus look at what's available on the large language model, if you're asking the same kind of questions on both sides, right?
Mm.
Would it lead to the same answers or different answers? Would the proprietary model be giving you better answers than the large language model? That's the part I don't know for sure as to how things are playing out.
No, no, I think that's a brilliant question, and I think that it's also a question that depends on when you ask the question, when
Hmm.
in time. So I'll be specific with that answer. So I think that as an example, building a large language model is something it's something that costs billions.
Yep.
Well, I think if you take a model like, I think just like the hardware cost, I think for OpenAI was estimated from one source I read at around 10 billion.
Hmm.
And then of course there are models that are, but we are still talking hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And I think, but that's only one component. And I think what's happening right now is people realize the value of data. And
Mhm.
suddenly, even if you had those 10 billions, you could not build OpenAI today because a lot of websites are closed for scraping.
Yep.
So what that means is, like, I think if you ask a large language model today that is fairly updated, you'll probably get a certain quality of answers. But if you fast forward 5 years, assuming that sites remain closed for scraping, I'm
Hmm.
not sure if those sources will be as updated. So I think that it's a really tricky question. It's a really really
Yeah.
multifaceted question.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't think about that point. You're right. Because if sites don't allow you to scrape, or we're seeing the what is it, the lawsuit right now between the New York Times and OpenAI,
Yeah,
or the partnership that Reddit just did, in the last couple of weeks, right?
sure,
It's an evolving landscape in terms of data ingestion at the end of the day into a large language model, right?
absolutely.
No, I don't think anybody can predict how these things will play out, but I think the question will constantly be coming up as to how robust is the data on the large language models, and should I even trust that more than, or trust it as much as what I know from my own proprietary information at the
Mm.
end of the day, right?
I think that's a brilliant question. It also comes back to the human in the loop point, right? Which is,
Yeah.
I mean, at least at Stravito, when we've defined and built the Stravito assistant, we've seen a major opportunity with Gen AI to support and enhance, clearly, clearly highlighting, not replace human expertise. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
in the case of Stravito assistant, we built it hand in hand with our
Hmm.
customers.
Hmm.
And as we have announced, Heineken is one example of those enterprise customers that is already using the platform, already using Stravito Assistant,
Yeah.
with the aim of boosting productivity, improving workflow,
Hmm.
just making sure that we reduce time to market for their initiatives, and make sure that we reuse insights.
Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that. So as you're thinking now, let's just talk about the next 6 months, 12 months, right? Because who can predict what's going to happen a year from now, right? In this world of exponentiality, right? In a
Yeah.
way, right? If you were to place your bets, in the market research space, in terms of
Mm,
what should people be thinking about, let's say, some people are just starting up, some people are resisting, there's going to be that group, of course. The
mm.
people who are playing already and dabbling, there are people who are going to be very much engaged in this space. So if you were to give advice to all those different groups that are out there, would it be the same advice? Would it be, nuanced advice? What would you say?
Well, I think most, I mean, there's the famous adoption cycle, and I think we've all seen it, and we're all aware of it. So
Hmm.
I think, and we all know where we sit on that,
Yeah.
that innovation cycle. I mean, we all have friends that are laggards, and some of us are innovators,
Yep.
early adopters. So that we already know. But independently on where you sit on that spectrum, I think it's important for you to spend time to understand.
Hmm.
You need to make sure that you understand what's going on because it's here to stay. And then, depending on how eager you are to be an innovator, you should try probing. And I think that we are about to witness a massive productivity boost and boom, really, in that it's going to support us to do much more than we've ever been able to do. And I think, and again, I think an emphasis will be on removing a lot of the grunt work
Hmm.
and allowing us humans to be even more creative than we can imagine. And I think that, similarly, I think an interesting thing is, as I meant, the reference I was making to Upwork in that study is that as a graphic designer, there are definitely skills that suddenly computers can do. But then there's also the ability, well, how much does this empower a graphic designer? I think it empowers that those
Hmm.
it might be very different for different, your specific use cases. But I think that uh, start out with making sure you understand. If the closer you are to being an innovator, identify a couple of use cases that can offload you
Hmm.
and start out with that. If you're a very early adopter, I would say look at the technologies that hold the biggest promise, and there are many.
Hmm.
Not going to highlight a single one,
Hmm.
and that just make sure to be out there and try it out because
Hmm.
it's to your point, Yogesh. I think that what we are about to see an exponential change, and
Hmm.
what is true today is probably going to be outdated next year. So better start now.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I think I've told you before that, I'm doing this three-part webinar series right now. This is my first one on Tuesday, where I'm trying to kind of like offer people the ability to understand, the basics of and foundational elements of, generative AI, even like definition. The first one was all about the definitions and things like that, and how do you even write prompts, right?
Mm,
There are people who are still not really sure how to go about doing that. So just giving them the structure, that's the easy part. But as I do the second and third ones, I want to showcase
mm,
what's possible, in the marketing and the market research space, whether it's around brand positioning or whether it's things like innovation or whatever, you can do stuff, right? So that actually leads me to a question. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Are you hearing conversations around synthetic data, and what are your thoughts on synthetic data in the market research space?
yeah, no, so that's definitely a divider. I'm not going to share my view, but I think it's
Yeah.
extremely, I mean, I have seen a lot of really interesting and very, I would say, thought provoking applications of synthetic data. So I think that it's
Hmm.
definitely something for us to track, to monitor. I think that maybe what will happen is one. I wouldn't call it a prediction, but I'd say a possibility is that it gets used in a way that we didn't like. The core use cases that will stand over time are not necessarily ones that we have thought of to start with.
Hmm.
But I definitely think that part of that will be here to stay.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
but then again, it's it's incredibly exciting, and I think let's if you are exploring it, don't get stuck into what the technology can do today, but rather accept and understand that probably the use cases will evolve, and
Hmm.
whereas it might be obvious in hindsight, it won't be necessarily obvious to spot from today's perspective.
So you said something. There's an insight here which I want to just like unpack a bit, right? Because I think there's a trap here for people, which is that when you're looking at things like synthetic data or even generative AI, both of them are big, very big topics, and there's a lot of baggage that's starting to build with both of them right now, right? But I think the trap basically is that if you're trying to compare to what you've been doing, then you're putting yourself in a corner. But what you just said is that, we haven't even thought about the use cases yet. You need to be open minded and look at the future, right? So, um, that's not anchoring you on how you do things. It's actually anchoring you on what could be possible to do, and can a generative AI tool or a synthetic data solution get you there? That's a different
100%,
thing,
100%. And I think if
you know?
to give you an example of something, I mean,
Yeah.
there are some famous ads that can be Googled if you're curious, for like the original ads for home computers
Hmm.
that were, I believe it was Honeywell that
Yeah.
basically sold them, and they were, they were basically pitching the idea of the home computer that could serve
Hmm.
stay-at-home moms in the kitchen and help them find recipes. And that particular application, the way it was described, never flew in at the time.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that home computers didn't become a reality. So I think that again, it's the core concept of like synthetic data and its different applications
Hmm.
might be very powerful. It's just that we might not necessarily identify the use case that will eventually lead it to massive success.
Yeah, no, I'm with
Or
you.
maybe we have, but I think that we need to be open for that at least.
Exactly, right. I think we have to experiment, and we have to see what's possible with that as a technology, right? But I think what I'm saying is that people become detractors when they're trying to compare to things in the past, and they're like, oh, see, it didn't work, therefore it's bad. What I'm saying is, no, that's not the way to frame this conversation. The frame is like, what is it that you think you can't do today, and can this new technology help you get there? And play and see if an experiment and see if it actually gets you there, right? So for example, I'll make it very specific. In my entire career working in marketing and market research, I've always wanted to be able to experiment and do what if scenario planning, right? I'm launching a new brand or a new product in the marketplace. What's going to be the adoption rate, and what happens if competition does XYZ? How can I react to that? Or what if the adoption isn't as fast as I thought it would be? What do I do? These are business questions that people are having conversations on, day in and day out in practically every company, right? But try to go build a model to do that today. Impossible, because you need to have so much data to be able to do that, right? But synthetic data can allow you to generate the data through synthetic data that say maybe you can run scenarios then all of a sudden, right? And the modeling capabilities that are available today allows you to do that. That wasn't the case 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, let's say.
I think you're thinking about it. I mean, I 100% agree with the way you were thinking about it.
Yeah, so and maybe people are playing with it. Maybe you're part of conversations on that already. So you've I see what's going on. So but I feel like that's the kind of stuff that can help us reframe the conversation and get away from the detraction and the negativity that maybe being attached to some of these kinds of tools, basically. So anyway, but that's just me, pontificating a little bit there. So, but anyway, so let's kind of like bring this home. So now, as you're thinking about the insight discovery process, and with tools like yours, and with the system that you have, you know, what would be your, like, one or two, pieces of advice to the audience as they're listening to you right now? What would you tell them that they should be thinking about doing moving forward with the kinds of tools that are available today?
Well, I think, I mean, I obviously will do it from the lens of Stravito, and
Yeah,
kind of the lens of what we're doing with Stravito Assistant,
yeah,
and the way we've approached it, to as we do for any innovation, is we really work closely with our enterprise customers.
yeah,
And but what we're seeing, and we've discussed this and mentioned this a few times today, is that what's happening in generative AI is happening at lightning speed.
yes,
And what is not possible generative AI today might just be, if well, be possible a few months from now.
yeah, yeah.
So we are, of course, very excited about what the future holds and
Mhm.
how we can continue to solve. And goes to your question. We focus on real life pain points, and we
Yeah.
really focus on how can we put more knowledge into the hands of those tens of thousands of employees that we serve.
Mhm.
How can we make sure that they collaboratively integrate insights to make more informed business decisions? So I
Yeah.
think that I think that always start with like very concrete problems. Never start with like an abstract notion of you want to use generative AI.
Yeah.
And I think for us that has been kind of, that's the way we approach it. And
Mhm.
we've been able to, I mean, we've had that approach since the get-go. And yeah, and I think that's also the right way to think about this technology shift. Otherwise it will be overwhelming.
It is all, yeah, you're right. You're right. No, this is great, Thor. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and being willing to, spar with me a little bit, in terms of, the Q&A, because these are hot topics. I think a lot of people these are on people's minds. It's almost like an elephant in the room in some cases, and the fact that you were willing to share your thoughts on this and kind of giving people some structure around how to think about this, I think was absolutely invaluable. So I want to just say thank you for doing that. Um, so let's kind of like wrap it up. um, I I just want to let everybody know that I do this show every 2 weeks for a reason, simply because apart from finding really fascinating guests like we had Thor today, right? It also takes time and effort to kind of like do all this work too, right? So, and I also have a day job besides doing this because I'm doing this actually for fun, really, So then the next person that's coming up in 2 weeks on June 6th at the same time as today is Russ Landy. He's an amazing person. I've known him for many years. He used to be a scout in the NFL and the CFL here in the US. He's been on podcasts and he's been on like the Big 10 or Big 12 network. And he's a known entity in the NFL space. Let's put it that way, right? I'm having him come in, excuse me, talking about personal branding. And you're like, what would Russ have to share about personal branding? Basically, what it is that athletes have to do a lot of personal branding if they want to get found out by scouts to get into the NFL or the CFL. So he's got some pretty interesting insights that could be applicable to everybody. So I hope you can join the show in 2 weeks' time. Thor, once again, thank you again for joining. I really appreciate it. And thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me, Yogesh.